begin by sort of setting the stage with what we are going to be covering today. My name is Chris Arnold. I'm the Vice President of Customer Experience Strategy at ASAP. I've been here for about 5 years, and I spend most of my days working closely with our largest, most strategic accounts. So we built out a lot of AI-centric roadmaps, and over the last 5 years, we've really moved from digital transformation to artificial intelligence to now generative AI, which is what we're going to really focus on today. And for some of you who may not be familiar with ASAP, we're an artificial intelligence solution provider. It's committed to solving the world's toughest problems in customer service. And if you've been in the contact center or customer service space for a while, you know that a lot of the challenges that we've experienced for decades. So we look forward to talking to you about some of those challenges today. We offer a pretty wide range of automation solutions, including an AI agent, which we call Generative agent, that autonomously and safely resolves complex customer interactions over both voice and chat. Today's webinar, more specifically, we're going to focus on the real-world opportunities and challenges of getting started with AI applied to the contact center. And we're very fortunate to have two seasoned practitioners willing to share lessons learned over the last several years. So without further ado, I'll ask Nikki and James to introduce themselves. Nikki, why don't you go first?
Sure. Name is Nikki Schmitt. I work for Assurant as a Director of Technology Products. Been with Assurant for about 12, almost 13 years now. I actually started as a contact center agent and have just gradually learned the space and the technology. I'm really passionate about the AI space and how it can really transform what our contact centers and agents can do and improve customer experience.
Thanks, Nikki. My name is James. I work our digital and AI transformation space. I have a background in accounting and finance, and I really love the AI world, and I've enjoyed working with our contact centers and now further across our enterprise and CFO organization, legal and risk communications. And really excited to have the opportunity today to discuss Generative Agent, ASAP, and our relationship with ASAP and how we've leveraged ASAP's tools to improve our business.
Yeah, thank you both for taking the time out of your busy day to be here. It's not a regular occurrence where you actually have practitioners join and are able to share the real world challenges that you face as you're trying to apply AI in your enterprise business. So, we probably got a lot of different people on here that are in different legs of the journey. So we're going to start with a poll. If you can take just maybe 30 seconds, take a look at this poll, and we want to understand in your contact center today, where are you where does it most accurately fit where you are in your AI journey? You can see the poll there. Yes. Okay. See people, answers coming in. Most people getting started. One attendee already realizing ROI.
Awesome.
Yeah. This is about what I see on a regular basis. A lot of enterprises, everybody knows, I think every boardroom in America is talking about generative AI and where are the places that we can get started. So this is pretty representative of what I see day in and day out. That's very helpful. Thank you for responding. So what we're going to do is we'll get into some questions here, and we'll hear directly from Nikki and James on where they're at in their journey, both historically where they've been and where they're going. So maybe, Nikki, I'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about how you started this journey with ASAP. What goals or strategic priorities did you have in mind when you first started the conversation?
Yeah, so a few years ago, like most large companies, we had a legacy chat platform, and it was serving enough of our needs. But we knew that AI was coming, and we knew that there was more we could be doing. Our agents were really just starting down the maturity pathway that they had. We also didn't have connected data. We couldn't really retain context or personalized journeys. So that really led us to start looking at what options were out there. As we started looking, we did find ASAP. We did do an evaluation, and ASAP really stood out because not only is it a chat platform, a generative agent platform, and at the time it was primarily focused on messaging that we were looking at it for, AI really is baked in. And so instead of it just being AI for your consumer or AI in your voice systems, it really is, let's make sure that that's part of every piece of the experience, including the agent experience. Being context and transcript aware, serving up recommendations just like your phone might for a text message, being able to really interconnect with our other systems for a less swivel chair-like experience, more single pane of glass. All of that really took us from looking at just another chat solution to what is that next level. You add into the continuous improvement pipeline that ASAP's built, how they've kind of redeveloped their AI pieces, not just from platform core basics, but into their development pipelines with generative AI. And now we've had a partner where we can really grow with and say, strategically, our needs and ASAP's needs are aligned in parallel. And they can meet what we need from a servicing perspective, as well as what our customers expect from a relationship perspective.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, when I think about where all we've been, you guys got in the game early. So you've been on this journey for years now. And from your perspectives, going all the way back to when we started this digital transformation, you mentioned messaging and then virtual agents and just the various technologies. And those technological advances have only sped up. But if you go all the way back to the beginning, what initially drove Assurant to explore AI in customer interactions?
A lot of it was like anybody wanting to make sure that we could surface the most efficient use of our agents possible. And so having agents that have high skills, high value, high business knowledge, answering FAQs, not a great use of their time. And we really identified that there was a lot we could be doing in that space to not only raise our customer experience and still give them what they needed, but also raise our agents to a place where their job didn't feel as mundane. The experiences they were able to support were much more complex. And we could expose kind of the areas of our business that could run more smoothly, more efficiently. And that's really where AI steps in. Especially with AI, with ASAP's AI platform, it really has made it so that the agent doesn't operate in a silo, and even the mundane tasks like taking notes or summarizing a conversation are things they don't have to expend mental energy on, which frees them up to actually deliver a much better customer experience, either with AI support or fully embedded as well.
That is such an important point. And, you mentioned being an agent on the phones back in the day, and I started as an agent on the phone as well. And so we have a unique perspective, having walked a few miles in those very challenging shoes. And anytime you can eliminate that manual work, like you mentioned, note taking, agents still taking notes today, just like they were 2 decades ago when I was an agent on the phone, is just crazy to me. And so now you can start to eliminate a lot of that cognitive load, allowing them to better focus on the customer. That pays dividends. So James, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, Nikki really hit the nail on the head. As we've evolved with ASAP, we've been able to leverage not only the tools that you guys have from customer and employee experience, but from an analytic perspective too. Anytime we see, say, a chat path that customers aren't enjoying or are falling and struggling in, we're able to use your insights and improve those flows. We're able to, be proactive, not reactive. And so that's something that's, unique to ASAP that a lot of other vendors don't offer. And we've been able to leverage it not only to increase our customer experience, but also improve our employee experiences, because when customers ultimately get to our agents, they know what the problem that they're trying to solve is.
That's right. That's great.
Yep.
Kind of building off of that, what key factors did you consider when selecting an AI vendor to kickstart your AI journey?
I'll jump in first. A good chunk of it is accuracy. Having a bot that can't speak the language your customers are speaking is kind of just table stakes. Really understanding that core focus of ASAP platform. And again, not to underscore it, but the fact that the AI is embedded. And so it's not just that you're getting automation towards your customers and talking with utterances and intent mapping and NLU training. It's also how that translates into the fuller end-to-end customer journey. So that was really table stakes. Secondarily was a very integrated solution that wasn't very difficult to build and maintain. Like many companies, we're always looking to do more with less. And so we don't necessarily need to build out entirely new development arms in order to support new technology. And so that was a really important factor for us. You add on components to that, like a constantly evolving roadmap, looking at generative technology, the extensibility of the LLMs that are involved. And all of that really means that we wanted a vendor that could do a lot for us, meet our needs without it feeling like a stretch to do so, and really return with accuracy. And that's what we found in ASAP.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And then just to add to that, we have a a massive business with very different customer needs, and ASAP's very, very trying to think of the word I'm looking for, very flexible with what our needs are, because, each of our businesses are different. Customers have different needs. We use different systems, and ASAP's very, very capable of plugging in with all of those systems and customer, queries, and is able to answer them for flying colors. So that's certainly a plus of ASAP.
I'll underscore that too, real quick, Chris, if you don't mind. For those who don't know Assurant, our lines of businesses are almost like our internal customers. We're very much generally a B2B2C area. It also means that how customers talk to us differs by each of those areas. And so what we've required of any AI technology, and specifically ASAP being customer focused on that technology, is to be able to interpret those needs within the context of our different business units. That's one of the main things we thought we would struggle with pretty significantly in any AI implementation, and it's become pretty seamless.
Mm-hmm.
I think you guys are touching on some really important points, because as AI has evolved, or as these digital technologies have evolved, and now that we're in this world of generative AI, it can really, for the first time, it handles the complexity that you guys are describing in a scalable way, in a transformational way. And so, the evolution has only sped up. And if you think about now large language models and AI agents, and we're really just at the onset of being able to have this agentic AI applied to the contact center in a way that really enhances customer experience. Have your priorities shifted at all since you began incorporating this Gen AI into your customer experience?
I'll let James start with that one.
Yeah, I would say from a business perspective, our objective at the end of the day is always a seamless customer and employee experience. But we also have to be, proactive with the environment in which we live. And we know that our competitors, peer companies are looking at agentic AI tools. And, we want to be on the cutting edge of that too. So, partnering with ASAP's enabling us to do that. And, as we look to the future and think about, the interactions we have with businesses, we want first, touch resolutions. We don't want to have to call in to a company we deal with multiple times. And agentic AI, provided it has the proper documentation and APIs to answer customer questions, the capabilities are really endless. You talk about interaction that might entail 3 different departments today, transferring a call 3 times. After you spend a couple minutes in the IVR, and you go from a 20-minute interaction to a 5-minute interaction with an AI agent in an IVR. So, that's the power of agentic AI, and certainly, what we want to work towards as we look toward the future and improving our customer and employee experiences even further.
And from a technology perspective, it's been similar, albeit maybe in a parallel fashion. Instead, our focus is starting to become more on prompt engineering, human in the loop, how the technology and the people can work best together. Because to underscore James's point, it's not about people or process. It's about the right hybrid of both. And so making sure that we have safeguards in place for any compliance-driven organization, that's going to be incredibly important, but also the right people to vet what's happening in the technology while still letting the technology do its job. It's really a big focus of us now that we're kind of moving into that space a little more heavily.
Those are fantastic points. And James, you made a comment that reminded me of my practitioner days, where for the longest time we were seeking to create universal agents, and instead of having the fragmentation that comes with all these various queues, we wanted a single agent, sort of a one-stop shop. And that was never possible because it was just too much information for a human to handle. And, now we're starting to see that these generative agents have these super high upper bounds, like with the right data behind it, which we'll get into a little bit. You can really begin to imagine these universal agents. And again, it just helps us overcome some of the challenges we've never been able to overcome in the past.
Absolutely. And, that's what we've been looking for with, any generative AI solution is, you go from, we think about it from a customer perspective. I call into companies all the time and I get transferred from one agent to another. And, it feels like your answer is never being solved. And with a generative agent, we've looked at it and, the resolutions are almost instantaneous as long as you're feeding it the proper data. And, that's just what we're looking for going forward.
That's great. So when you think about the journey that I'll say more recently you've been on, where you want sort of everybody on the AI train, has there been any sort of best practices or obstacles that you've run into as you're in the midst of this transition towards AI agents?
Yeah, take that one first, James. So I think what we're really finding is that the technology is only as good as what you give it, right? Just like any solution, garbage in, garbage out. So if your data is in a space where it can't be delivered through APIs, or if it's just in a place where it needs to be cleansed before it's super usable, those are areas we've found that we should look at as part of implementation. It's not to say it's not usable. It's not to say that the AI or really any of the generative properties can't repurpose it or can't support it. It's more making sure that you know what those fallacies are in your data set ahead of time so you can account for them and how you build things. And that's the second best practice we've found, is really having robust knowledge bases to supplement your data. Having really complex and detailed business processes, as an insurance company is like to do, those are your best source of knowledge. And if it's easy to connect to, if it's robust enough that you can rely on it for almost all of your agent training, it's going to be able to supplement whatever your data stores are as well as possible. I think the one other thing that we've really learned is that continuous improvement cannot be undersold. There is no harm in looking at things more often than less. And just knowing where you're at is the best way to be able to see where you want to go. And by that, I mean reviewing data sets, reviewing responses, reviewing KPIs. I know a lot of companies, ourselves included, tend to look at data as almost a sub-factor of performance instead of true performance. There's a lot of bottom dollar type savings, but there are a lot of metrics that inform the rest of the experience that can really help all of those metrics grow as you do. So making sure you have the right data, the right visibility, and the right information. I mean, that's really the groundwork we've been able to look at for any new implementation. Check those boxes and you're good to go.
Yeah, that can't be stressed enough. Before you're thinking about implementing a generative agent or any kind of generative AI in your business, know your limits, know what data you have, know what you can transform your data into, and be proactive with it, because that's always the biggest roadblock in any kind of implementation, whether it be a generative agent or another project. Like Nikki said, garbage in, garbage out. Whatever you feed the model is what it spits back out. And, if you can be as detailed as possible in your data and synthesize it as much as possible, the sky's the limit.
Completely agree. And I think that's really where the AI train leaves the station, is really making sure you've got those great sources of data. And every enterprise I work with is typically sitting on mountains of data that for the most part have historically been used for reporting, maybe a little analytics for actionable insights, but not often even that. And so now we're at this point in time where, proactively curating these sources of data. And I would say, even starting with your customer journeys, and not always happy path. Figure out where those points of friction are and see if there's, are there knowledge base articles that need to be added or updated? Are there APIs that need to be built? because that's ultimately how you'll address things, scary things like hallucinations and all the things that we want, to keep the AI on the rails. So starting with those customer journeys and curating that data, you guys touched on such an important point. So looking back over, let's look back over all 4 years that you guys have been on this journey from implementing chat and messaging, how your workflows have been modernized, because it's never just technology. There's people considerations, there's process considerations, and then of course the technology is the enabler. When you think about the cumulative changes that have driven the technology and process changes, can you share how this journey has led to changes in your digital mix and containment metrics more broadly?
Sure.
Yeah. Sorry, James. So the digital mix really has been opened up. While we had these channels before, those familiar with omni-channel strategy can attest to the fact that it's usually you have channels in silos, very multi-channel. People have to repeat themselves back and forth. There's lack of transitions that are seamless between them. When we first started with ASAP, we knew that we wanted to get a better digital mix shift so that people were on digital more, and where they weren't on digital, we could shift them into it. ASAP enabled that with some out-of-the-box features, and then we did some additional exploration to say, where else can we enable this? Because of the way that the AI works and the way that ASAP's platform engages customers and keeps conversations asynchronous, meaning not all at one time, it can kind of be an ongoing discussion. We were able to do things like IVR to chat, which allow us to have somebody who's on our phone receive a link and chat with an agent instead of having to go either all the way back to a website that may or may not meet their needs, that they may or may not have already been to, or through to a phone agent, which doesn't have concurrency and is our highest value call. So instead, we have this third option now that allows us kind of a hybrid of both. In addition to that, that really transforms the process because now we have text-based conversations that we can then data mine for automations and keep pushing people back into those digital channels for increased retention. So instead of it being simply you're on the phone or you're on the web, or maybe you're on some mix of them, but we don't really know, and we don't really know what you're trying to do. We only have as much as our systems allow us to. The chat system, the messaging system, and now auto transcribe and auto summary, which listens to a phone call and will automatically summarize it for our agents, gives us this wealth of data that really cannot be undersold for us to go and say, what are our customers talking about? How do we first automate that? And then make sure that we're treating for that exception handling instead. And that becomes the biggest process shift that I've seen is really a focus on digital first, automation second, making the agent's job easier third.
Yeah. And we think about the contact center and the actual agents using the tools, from the company's perspective. They know coming into a conversation what the customer is chatting about. They're able to look at historical conversations the customer has had with us. And then from an analytics perspective, we're able to take those conversations and improve the experience for future customers going forward. And so I think about, additionally from an agent perspective in the past, having to take notes and document exactly what happened on a call to the T for the next agent that picked up the conversation. Auto transcribe and auto summary in the background doing all of that work for them, posting the notes automatically to our system so that the next agent knows exactly what happened on the call and can address what problem might not have been solved. And so that's a big perk of the tools that we've been able to deploy from a customer and employee perspective that has really driven up our success.
Yeah, and I'll add my 2 cents on this. And for anybody who may not fully understand what we mean by digital mix, it's, when you look at all of your customer interactions, what percentage of those are voice versus which percent of those are serviced in some sort of digital channel. Could be on the website, mobile app, could be in the IVR, could be, this virtual agent that we've had forever. It could be now generative agent, or it could be chat, messaging. So there's a lot of different digital properties, and we want to have a strategy where we help you get the most out of all of those different digital options. And historically, we've always thought about the digital option as sort of the lower cost channel. And it is. But there's also now an experience element to this, where for the first time, not only can you address the cost associated with your customer interactions, but you can also elevate the experience. And I don't know if it was COVID or what, but there has now been a shift. Consumer desire for these digital options has never been higher. There's never been a greater willingness to interact with these digital channels. And as long as you take the customer journey into account and these things are stitched together in a way where they actually work and they resolve customer issues, you're going to win every time. And I see higher CSAT in these channels than I do voice. Not many customers enjoy making a voice call into customer service, albeit sometimes it's absolutely the best channel. And so that's why we think digital mix is an important measure for enterprises, because consumers really want that choice, convenience, and control that comes with that sort of always available digital option.
And I just want to add one thing to that, Chris, because you hit on something important, which is that customers really are going to choose whatever channel works the best for them. So how do we meet their expectations there and make it a seamless experience? A lot of what we've done over the last couple of years is optimize that digital channel, to Chris's point, for that digital mix shift. At this point, we're at a level of maturity in some of our areas where we actually want to focus on the voice channel, because we've recognized there is a ceiling. Some people are just going to call. And if that's the case, then how can we apply those same maturity approaches to those other channels of choice? Because you can do a lot in offering options. People are still going to choose the easiest path forward. And it's our job to meet that easiest path need. So now we're focusing a lot on optimizing those voice channels as well to make it seamless for the agent and the customer. And to Chris's point, tying the journey paths together so that we're not restricting them to one channel. If they want to be on chat at one point or in the car while they're calling in, or maybe their kid is in the background screaming, as children do, we want to make sure that we have the options that meet their needs at the point in time and still make it a good experience. And that's where a lot of the generative AI, the AI componentry, and a lot of ASAP's functionality has helped us meet.
That's so good. And so let's sort of fast forward to relatively recent history. And so now we're looking at AI agents or agentic AI, where now we're really wanting the customer experience, the interaction, to be as autonomous as possible. And I know you guys have, and we've worked together on where are the optimal places to start, but can you talk a little bit about the decision process to identify what those initial use cases might be?
Sure. Yeah. So what we've been evaluating through this process is what's the lowest hanging fruit of queries that customers have for us that can be solved by a generative agent, whether that be they have a question about their terms and conditions on their contract, or they have a question about the status of their claim, or they want to file a new claim. We think about the low hanging fruit and the 80% of interactions we have that could be solved, that could be addressed via a generative agent. And so when we think about all of those different scenarios, we've looked at the data we have available to present to customers. And we've also considered those instances where the generative agent can help get you 99% of the way there, but an agent, a human, at the end of the day, still needs to make the final decision about if that's the appropriate answer to tell a customer. It's so important to keep the agent in the loop. And so you've talked about human in the loop and wanting to use those tools to the agent's benefit, because they go from having to handle a claim from start to finish that takes 15, 20 minutes. And it said the generative agent takes the claim, and the agent makes a decision on if they approve it or deny it. And so that's something that's really helpful about a generative agent, is not only are you giving the customers the option to interact with a generative agent tool, you're offering them a chat channel if they don't want to talk to someone on a generative AI platform, or they can speak to an agent. They have all the options that are available to them. And so that's really the main deciding factor with any project we undertake, is meeting our customers where they are, because not everyone has the same desire for an experience with us. I personally like to talk to an agent when I have interactions, and a generative agent for me is super helpful, because I'm still talking to someone. I'm being able to ask it a variety of questions. And, some people prefer to do that on a chat platform. So generative agent can plug into a chat platform too. So you go from having to build large scale flows with, different endpoints to a generative tool that, identifies the customer's intent, routes them to the right place, and answers their question, solves their problem. So like Nikki said, you really have to meet your customers where they are. And, everyone has different perspectives on how they want to handle their questions with us. And so if you're a company considering implementing a generative agent, I would encourage you to do the same thing. Think about the instances where your customers, struggle the most, and meet them where they are. Give them tools that that they can help them solve their problems. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about understanding your customers' motivations too. Generative AI works best when you, to James's point, understand that most of the time customers want to talk to an agent is because they're confused or they're concerned or their motivations are high priority. If most of the time, especially in this day and age, they'll choose a more traditional digital channel like a website, unless they're a very traditional type experience. And what that traditionalist looks like varies by so many different factors, by age, by location, by background, by culture. There's so many different things to factor in that instead, as a company that has a different motivation than just customer service, you also have to figure out where are those places where it makes sense to deploy automation at the right time instead of automation for automation's sake. And that's what generative agents can do. It really is saying, okay, I see your problem. I see what you need. Let me answer the main part and then make sure that you have the surety of a live person in the background so that you can trust what I'm telling you. And that trust exercise is really foundational in that use case building. If you're picking a use case that's just automation for automation, but it misses the point of what a customer needs out of that, which is the foundational trust that the answer they're getting is correct, it's not going to turn out as well as if you can find a use case where it's higher value, higher complexity with a wealth of data that just needs that little extra bit of trust that an agent can provide at a much less interactive rate.
Before I move to the next question, if you haven't been following along in the chat, I just want to draw the audience's attention to, we want to make this webinar as practical and give you as much takeaway so that you can start, if you're not already, deep into your AI journey, we want to give you some practical tools. So check out some of the resources that we're going to provide in the chat. All right, James, I'm going to start with you on this next question. How is working with an AI partner, and there's a lot of them out there, and there's a lot of marketing and sort of what I would call noise in the AI contact center space. But how has working with ASAP as a partner supported you in this journey?
ASAP's been incredibly helpful. I think about the journey that I started on a couple of years ago with ASAP, and I was learning all of the data elements that ASAP provides, from containment rate, flow success, queue abandonments, and ASAP's been able to guide me along the way to teach me so much that I had no idea about. And so I say that's really the differentiators. A lot of companies or partners will set you up with a solution. It'll start to work, but then they'll kind of drop off. ASAP's there every step of the way, with respect to any of the implementations that we've engaged with, from auto transcribed and auto summary to our chat platform, our voice program. It's a continuous improvement. And so I'd say that's really the differentiator from ASAP to other partners that we've engaged with. Is it's not just holding our hand; it's getting us to the finish line and then staying with us. So I'm sure Nikki would express similar sentiments.
Yeah, I agree. You said it really well. We do have looked at other vendors, but it's very much more build it yourself, or we'll help get you there, and then you're off to the races on your own. There's always something new. There's always questions. There's always new things we want to do, whether it's an extension of what we already are doing or new functionality. And ASAP really has been a differentiated partner in that space. We're not, ever hung out to dry on questions or on concerns or on issues, there's always a support resource ready and willing to help build, develop, manage, whatever that may be.
Yeah. And you think about it from a perspective of, decision making, and you might implement something and a couple of months later you need to change the way in which it interacts with customers, or flow needs to be updated to better address their needs. And we can go straight to ASAP and work with our partners and make those changes happen pretty quickly, which a lot of partners aren't able to assist with. So
and we certainly appreciate that. We appreciate you guys as a customer. And obviously I'm biased, but I go back to my 2 decades of sort of being on your side of the table while I was at Verizon, and I bought a lot of technology. And James, what you said early on, where there were too many instances where the people I were buying technology from, who I thought was going to be a partner, after the contract was signed, they just disappeared. And that's always unfortunate. But in terms of deploying AI and the iterative nature of this, where we want to start small and we want to iterate quickly, it's really important for you to have a great AI partner that has a level of expertise, particularly in the contact center domain, where there's a lot of very unique challenges. And so I really don't envy the buyers trying to navigate these. In fact, I was on a panel a few weeks ago with a contact center leader, and he said they issued an RFI that went to 28 different vendors. I can't even imagine trying to sort all of that. So I definitely do not trying to find the right partner.
Yeah.
All right. So
you want a partner. You want to work with someone who treats you as a partner, not as a client.
That's exactly.
And that's the difference.
It's the only way to drive those continuous business outcomes. All right. So what's next? Love to hear from both of you guys on this, but what's next on the AI strategy, and how do you see AI being applied to the Assurant environment evolving within your organization?
Sure. Nikki, it doesn't matter who starts on this one. I guess we probably have similar perspectives, but as we've discussed, throughout the conversation, our customers have a variety of needs, and that entails people that like to chat with us and people that like to call us, people that like to use our website platforms and not have to talk to us at all. So we've tried to really understand every customer pain point from a chat perspective to a voice perspective, and we've been able to use ASAP's data to do that with respect to the transcripts, summaries. We've run exercises on intents, really understanding what customers are calling us about. Why are they chatting? What are they chatting with us about, and why? And as we think to the future about implementing generative agent tools, we're able to use that data to help decide which paths make the most sense to send someone into a generative agent solution. Because at the end of the day, you want to give the customer the best answer possible. And if someone's calling into our IVR just because their phone number's on their contract and they want to get an answer to a question, we'd offer them the option to chat with us. A lot of people take it, and that just shows that everyone has different wants and needs. But for those customers that like to stay with us in the IVR and get to an agent, we're going to offer them the generative agent solution, and then they'll be able to get answers to their questions without having to go online. And if they have to go to an agent for those really hard pressed, issues, they'll be able to. So I'd like to say that our strategy going forward is all of the above approach. It's iterating on everything that we already have, making it better, using the analysis and data that we have at our disposal to drive those changes. So it's hard to say if we would prioritize anything. I think we're prioritizing everything.
Yeah, I fully agree, and I would underscore it's the really driving themes for us are how we use the technology to personalize experiences, make them more seamless, and also make our agents more efficient. AI is, and it, in my personal opinion, should never be about replacing people. It should be about supplementing them. It should be about really using their skill sets to the best of their advantage and really amplifying the power of people. With that, ASAP's approach to making sure we have really integrated AI on the agent side as well as the customer is a major focus going forward. Is how can we do that? How can we use the generative AI to make sure that the things that are really worth their time or in their space, to make sure that they don't just feel bored with their job and we have consistent turnover. We don't want that. Instead, we want to amplify their knowledge and bring them along with us on this journey. And then when you apply that back to your customer journeys, I mean, really personalizing that, which is what generative AI can do, to say, yes, Nikki, you are different than James. And yes, you probably do want to stay on a digital channel. Oh, I hear your kids screaming in the background. Let's just switch you real quick. Being able to really do those things with limited friction and then also make sure our agents are happy is really the focus of our roadmap going forward. So, to sum that up, let's put generative AI in. Let's make our agents happy and our customers happy, and then personalize what we do for them. And it all comes out pretty great in the end.
Absolutely.
So how about one more question from me, and then we'll try to squeeze in a couple of questions from the chat. When we started this webinar, we started with the poll, and it's clear the majority of the audience is in the early stages of sort of trying to figure all this out. And, it can, quite frankly, it can feel overwhelming because all of this is new. So when you think about the journey you've been on, and thinking about the audience being early in this generative AI implementation, can you give one piece of advice, maybe where to get started?
I'll go first. I kind of just said it, but bring your people with you. Your agents are a wealth of information. Your business partners are a wealth of information. Nobody does not have value in this discussion, and especially those who are on the front lines of your systems, your day-to-day. They're going to know the best about your data, about your knowledge bases, about what's happening with your consumers. If you bring them with on this pipeline, even if it's just a survey, what are they dealing with on a day-to-day? What are common things they would complain about? You're going to be much better prepared to kind of adjust for those as you overlay AI into your resources. And if they're off in a vacuum somewhere, kind of with this knowledge just sitting unused. So in addition to all the pieces we said about APIs and knowledge bases, your people are your most important asset in starting to build this up.
Absolutely. I can't express that, stress that enough. With any of these solutions, they don't just, you don't just flip a switch and they're live. You have to have partners from the contact center, from your business, from IT, from leadership, senior leadership, from your customers, everyone's a factor in the journey. So as you, look to implementing tools like this, be aware of the data you have, leverage your data. If you don't have some of the data that you need to answer customer questions, get it, build it, create those APIs and stand it up. But at the end of the day, your people are who you're able to get the projects across the finish line. I can't tell you, and I can't express enough to all of the people, that work at Assurant, who I work with on a day-to-day basis in our contact centers and our business, who are right there alongside us, helping us build flows that can answer customers' questions in the chats. That's your superpower.
I cannot agree with you more. And the sort of sad thing, and my experience being able to interact with lots of different enterprises who are also in the infancy of this, is that they rarely recognize the importance of bringing employees along, as Nikki stated, and then James, you reiterated. There is a bit of a stigma out there with just about every company I work with, where employees are concerned about AI eliminating their job. And some jobs will be eliminated. There's no doubt about that. We've got to be honest. But what I'm seeing, especially in the more near term, is that there is an evolution of jobs. A lot of agents are moving into more of AI curation type roles, where either they're helping build flows because nobody knows the customer journey better than them. Nobody knows the friction points better than those frontline agents. They just don't have to have the conversation with the customer. They're able to curate knowledge-based articles in customer-friendly language. And so these are sort of evolutions of jobs. And so really getting out in front of that and educating the workforce on how AI is not a threat AI is going to be a very powerful tool for the most successful enterprises. And then data curation, we've talked a lot about that. That's really the enabler. That's the, that's the gasoline in the engine, if you will, to make this AI engine roll. So the most successful enterprises will be the ones that get their data house in order sooner than later. Fantastic. Thank you all so much for that. I am going to try to grab a couple of questions from the chat. I'll try to get the ones that probably most apply to those of us early in our journey. Here's one. How about, Nikki and James, you both mentioned multiple times this human in the loop, this notion of having agents, there with the AI, some type of hybrid model. How do you see human in the loop working together with the AI? What's your perspective?
Really, on the technology side, it's the data and the APIs, knowing with a combination of business processes when an agent is necessary. And that's where your people come in, is saying, this is not something we want to put in the hands of just an AI and telling the AI that, saying, this is something that we have maybe a higher threshold for needing personal interaction. Let's task escalate that. Let's make sure an agent has eyes on it and it's not just happening in a silo. That really becomes one of the more tactical approaches we're looking at. That way, it's not some inbox to be managed. It's not some perpetual queue of things that needs to be done. It's not sifting through thousands and thousands of transcripts. It's more real time at the moment and decision based. And so you're really amplifying the use of that AI. One of the other things we're doing is making sure that we are expanding the use of things like prompt engineering and prompt writing to make sure that any generative AI is really, really vetted on a day-to-day, if not hour-to-hour basis. Chris mentioned things like hallucinations. We've mentioned having the right data and knowledge be a piece of your build structure. Part of that comes with testing. If you really want to catch those things early, it's really investing some of those resources, and could even be the same resources waiting for a task from a generative agent, that are really testing it out, saying, what happens if I ask this question? What happens if I ask that question? What if I feed it jargon? What if I copy and paste from today's New York Times headline? What happens then? And really just kind of throwing the book at it to make sure that it's not just human in the loop from our processes, it's human in the loop from an AI perspective, and really vetting those concepts out as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about, when testing, generative agents and how they work. The biggest thing I can stress to anyone is knowing your limits and the prompting. The prompting is huge. You can feed it APIs, you can feed it knowledge bases, articles, anything. You can connect it to websites, anything. But unless you give it specific parameters on what it is allowed to do, you're basically just, creating a ChatGPT model that gives you anything. So I stress to anyone is to really know that prompting and giving the models parameters is incredibly important, because you don't want to give customer the wrong the wrong indication that you're going to do something that you can't do. And that's also important. That's also why it's so important to keep agents in the loop. Agents are able to monitor those chats in live time if they notice that, the agent is struggling with answering customers' questions or is giving a wrong answer, which I haven't experienced the wrong answer piece because we've, mastered the prompting. But, you still have to have an agent that's watching and making sure that you're providing the right information to people. Because you don't want to run those risks. And I saw someone mention, how do you assess that risk? That's exactly how you have to monitor interactions on an hour by hour basis, making sure you're giving the right answers. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I would also add one of the things that we've used as a talking point, which admittedly has some very responses based off of people's personal experience with AI, is how do you know what your agents are going to say?
Mm-hmm.
You just have to trust it. Well, this technically is even more systematic, and you have far more oversight controls than you would on a day-to-day with your agents, right? And so there is a nature and there is a maturity curve line of just building that trust with the tooling. But to James's point, having those safeguards, having those parameters, having those barriers and those checks and balances kind of starts to build that trust within any organization.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. In the AI world, we call a lot of what you described just now as observability. And I would say anybody that is embarking on this AI journey for all the reasons Nikki and James just mentioned, observability is very important. And there has to be a human involved. And there's a couple of different ways you do that, and you need an AI solution that has safety, at the forefront, because, since we've launched Generative Agent, I've seen customers say crazy things just because they're trying to sort of jailbreak the bot from its training to get it to do whatever, crazy thing that the customer wants it to do. And so you have to have safety mechanisms, both for what's coming in as well as for what's coming out of the bot back to the customer, and having that observability to see how well, it's handling what's coming in and what's going out. It gets back to the garbage in, garbage out Nikki mentioned. But then it's the other piece of the human involvement that I'm reminded of when I was, in the contact center space for so long was you hire agents and the first thing they want to do is, when am I going to get off this phone? They don't want to do that job forever. Most of them don't want to do that job forever. And so now with this human in the loop, the agent, instead of being the front line of defense on the phone with the customer, who many times these are very emotive and complex interactions, now the agent gets to supervise the technology. And it gets to approve things like credits and discounts and all the things you may not want the automation to do autonomously. It gets to provide a level of supervision, and it's just an empowering of the human on all fronts. And that's why I say these are evolutions of jobs more than it is about elimination of jobs. So much opportunity. So thanks for touching on that.
Well, and I just want to mention, comment in the chat, Chris, that kind of touches on that too. That thread is exactly how we changed the conversation with management when it comes to AI tooling is your agents don't necessarily want to deal with your angriest users. So let's make it simple for everybody and make sure that we kind of protect our interests on both sides, make their jobs easier, make their lives easier, provide that surety, all those things you just mentioned about observability and the need for those people. That's really how you start to manage that conversation.
Yeah.
And maybe one last one, just as we're coming up on time. In a lot of ways, we've been on this digital transformation journey for quite a while, but still in most enterprises, there's significantly more voice interaction than there is digital interaction. We all agree that, there needs to be some measure of voice, but I still believe there's a lot of meat on that digital bone if we design it the right way and truly, like James said, meet customers where they are. With these more conversational generative technologies, how are you prioritizing voice and digital, and how do you think about, what's most important?
Yeah, I'd say they're both important, right? We have a robust chat and voice platform. I'd say you can't focus on one more than the other because they're both so important to our business and who we are. So I'd say going forward, any new tools we implement are probably going to be applicable to both platforms. There's generative chat, there's generative voice. You can engage with customers in a generative manner on our website, and you can do it on the IVR just the same. And I've been able to test and see it firsthand how much easier it is to get an answer to a question with a generative tool than it is a generic chat flow or an IVR prompt. So I'd say that it's hard to pick one or the other because we're going to be focusing on both. And I know that our leadership supports that and wants us to meet customers where they are. And in our business, we have a lot of customers that like to choose voice and a lot of customers that like to choose chat. So we'll be focusing on both very heavily.
Yeah, I think actually the real shift for us is building it so that you can have a feature available in both places at once. Because again, just what we're all talking about, you can't choose for the customer. In the end, they're going to choose what works best for them. So instead, making sure that that's perpetually available and things like generative AI and generative agents and agentic technologies are across those channels is really going to be the focus, so that it's not a disjointed experience. It's not, a smarter one in one channel versus another. It's really giving them the opportunity to have the best possible experience anywhere they choose to engage.
Exactly.
That's it.
What's awesome about ASAP too is you're able to build those generative agents, and they act the exact same in chat as they do in voice.
Yep. Build once, deploy many. Exactly.
As it should be. Yeah, meet customers where you are and make sure that whatever that channel, that the customer chooses is as empowering. Make sure if it's a chat experience is that it's as empowered to resolve the issue the first time as it would have been in voice. Same thing with the website, the IVR, every touch point. And that's the differentiator, and that's a competitive advantage. So hats off to Assurant. I just want to commend you for taking the step, that you took really 4 years ago. And ever since then, you've had a bias for action. You've moved boldly. You continue to push the boundaries of leveraging technology to wow your customers, not just your customers, but your employees. You're a fantastic place to work. And so we love partnering with you, and we look forward to partnering with you for a long, long time to come. All right. So thanks, James, for joining us. Thanks to the audience for joining us. We're up on time. I will just remind everyone that you will get a recording of this sent tomorrow to the email that you've given to us. And we hope that you'll visit asap.com to experience the full generative AI solutions that we're bringing to the market. With that, we'll say farewell.